we'll begin. Today's topic is the rise of collaborative development among private label brands. And I think one of the challenges here that's kind of going to be interesting, and we'll go through it, is how collaboration has really started to rise as an important aspect of what's going on. So we'll start in just a second. We can then also encourage some questions, and we can look at the chat line later on and sort of try to answer some of those. Okay. All right. So, we looked at a lot of what's been going on with private brands in the retail world, and we spent a lot of time, working with retailers on this and talking with them about it and talking even with national brands about this. And I think one of the things that's really started to emerge in recent years is that we started to see that the development aspect, the way that the world works in terms of private label has really become a lot more complex. It's become a lot different. It's evolved a lot since the last, say, 3 to 5 years. So one of the examples I wanted to use sort of as maybe a lighthearted way to sort of lead into this, I suppose, is a book that was recently published about a week ago or two, and saw an interview on the Daily Show with Jon Stewart with Elizabeth Kolbert, where she talks about, in her book, The Sixth Extinction, about the importance of what's happening as a result of global warming and all kinds of other environmental trends. One of the key things they identified, though, is what they call the migration algorithm. And what the migration algorithm suggests is that for organisms to survive, especially in areas like the tropics and some of the other places that are evolving pretty rapidly in terms of their patterns, is they have to move about 30 feet a day in order to stay current. So they probably have to move further north or south or up the mountainside, if you will, in order to survive. And so one of the things we're seeing is that it's important inside here to keep moving. It's important to move in the right direction. So that 30 feet a day is really a survival strategy. What we're seeing in terms of private label is there's probably a very similar kind of thing that we want to focus on, right? So we see that the private label market is a very dynamic one, and what we've seen looking at some Mintel data from their global new products database is that probably we've seen for each of the last 3 years probably over 9,000 new product introductions or package relaunches or whatever for private label around the globe. And that works out to about 25 to 30 per day as well. So we have that same onus on us to probably be aware of what's going on in the environment as it's rapidly changing as we go through that all these organisms are being forced to look at in the tropics in terms of the sixth extinction. Okay, so an even deeper challenge for us, if you will. I think the other part about this that's probably somewhat challenging for us is that if we look at the way the world is changing here, is we're seeing is that the way that we have to look at value is changing. It's becoming more complex. And so what we have here are a couple examples of the kinds of claims that are being made in food, beverage, beauty and personal care, and household products. And you can see sort of across the board there are some different things that are going on there, but in general what we've seen is that economy or price has started to sort of fade a little bit in terms of its importance, and other things are starting to take over. So what this suggests is, yes, price is still important, and that's one of the key reasons why people do indeed enjoy using private brands. But I think one of the other things we're starting to see is that what shoppers are looking for in terms of value is changing a little bit. Expectations are rising a little bit. The way that retailers are trying to differentiate themselves from each other because of their products is changing a little bit as well. Now, the other thing we started to see that's related to this is that the shoppers have really started to alter in a sense. So you think about it, shoppers have never stopped shopping. They have reduced the amount of shopping, but they keep doing this. And so what this means is, like, one of the questions that must come up on every day for retailers is, how do we keep these shoppers engaged? How do we remain competitive? And it's always about how do we get our shoppers to have an exclusive experience with what we're, with our brand, with our store, with our environment. And so what we've seen here is a kind of an interesting thing is that the challenges here have started to escalate, because you can see that the number of times that people are shopping has sort of gone down from about 171 in 2006 to about 146 in 2012. So we've seen actually that the number of shopping trips has gone down while the basket size has gone up nominally. So, at the end of the day, what we're all doing is we're competing for for a smaller number of dollars. And so it's even more important than ever to sort of create these differences, if you will, as we start to go out and look at how we can provide a differentiated experience, differentiated products for our shoppers. One of the things that's also started to come out of this is because it's become so complex, we told you that the shoppers are really changing pretty rapidly because they keep shopping and it's such a regular thing. We've shown you that there are lots of new product introductions in the private label area, lots of improvements, etc. That really increasingly there's a need for new skill sets among retailers. And I think you can think about all these different skill sets. So we did a little bit of a word cloud on the right there, right? But you can start to see all kinds of things that people are talking about, like they have to now be worried about. So I got to look at global traceability of my supply chain. You have to look at category management. You have to look at product life cycle management, quality assurance, marketing, customer intelligence, packaging, portfolio development. So really all these kinds of things mean that this dynamic environment are really requiring retailers to have a lot of new capabilities. And I think if you think about how we maintain our competitive advantage, a big portion of what we're trying to do is we're trying to find these resources because they help us create competitive advantage. And historically, the way we've looked at this is kind of, we said historically resource ownership really goes hand in hand with this competitive advantage. But I think what we've started to see is that's putting a lot of pressure on all of us, if you will. And so one of the questions is how can we sort of draw on external resources and maybe not own all of them? And so really what we're going to show you is that there are probably a number of examples where people are sort of either buying those resources, building those resources, or borrowing those resources. And I think you start to see as we go through here that there are probably a combination of both internal and external collaboration that we'll see are important parts to being successful in today's private label environment, if you will. So, 3 areas that we're going to focus on. These are marketing areas, so I'm not focusing on logistics. I'm not really focusing on manufacturing per se, but on the marketing areas. And really those are going to be around insight, which is really a key part. Innovation, which is another essential part to the lifeblood of any private brand portfolio. And then finally go to market, all of which have really started to change pretty dramatically. So one of the key things that we wanted to focus on here for just a second in terms of insights is maybe able to provide a definition of what we mean by an insight. And so, a better understanding of both consumer and shopper insights are important. Now, simply stated, what we're going to say is that, shoppers are people who are shopping for consumer needs, so whether they're their own or somebody else's, so we're going to sort of say that those play a large role no matter whether I'm talking to the shopper or to the consumer to understand how those work. But the insight is really key in 2 ways. One is insights are about motivation or the backstory behind behavior, and that's really critical. We've gotten so very good at measuring behavior. We think about the advent of all these kinds of tools that we can use, Google Analytics, big data, all these kinds of things allow us to do that. But motivation is still one of the things that's a little bit more difficult to get at, and that's where a lot of the insight lies. The second thing about an insight that is important is that there's an implication behind it. And so, what we love about insights is they so essentially boil something down, but also they have this relevance and this urgency because of the implication. Okay, and so what we're suggesting inside here is that one of the things that's also changed here is we need to almost move from understanding to empathy in terms of our shoppers. One of the things that we have heard a lot from retailers, and we've talked to them in a number of conversations, is that historically segmentation has been, it's been kind of either demographic and or spend based. And so what you do if you're doing that segmentation for the retailer as a whole, the whole enterprise, that's a key part to focus on. But increasingly, as we start to develop all these new offerings or new approaches to private brands, we're seeing that it's becoming more and more important to get to category-specific insights, and there's a need to do that very quickly. Historically, what you've seen in a lot of places, if you have only a group that can sort of do some of this, what they have to focus on what's going on at the corporate level, or if they're really good, they're really, really, really busy, and so it's hard to get on their calendar in a very, very short way of doing so. So this is one of the areas where we think that collaboration can play a large role, especially if you can start to partner with some folks, so maybe to borrow and to buy some of those services as well. But I think like a great example of somebody who's done this in terms of bringing it forth very fast and rapidly is Zara, where they can go from 2 weeks from street to store in terms of any trend. So we think that there's some of this out there with the insights that are starting to make sense. Second thing is that maybe a different way to look at insights. So one of the areas that we've looked at in terms of how to slice opportunities is what we'll call need states. That's probably not necessarily a new approach to things, but I think by looking at need states and shopper segments, we can start to identify where the opportunities are inside of our product portfolio. And maybe one of the examples I would use of that I think is a really good one is Safeway Snack Artist. When they went in and sort of studied this, they went and looked at the need states of the snack consumer, and there are many of those needs, and there are lots of ways to go through and look at this. I think one of the important things to know about a snack user was that while they understand that the category sometimes isn't good for them, especially if you look at just straight salty snacks, what they're starting to say, though, is they realize that it's an indulgence, it's a treat, and they're still invested in it in that sense. And so they're looking for new experiences, they're looking for new textures, new flavors. And so something like Snack Artist, which is great, has sort of captured the attitude of this particular segment, and also it allows them sort of to pursue their needs, if you will, their wants in this category in the way that they would like. So I think what this has done is it sort of tapped into the need states, if you will, of the snack consumer, and it's done a really good job of trying to address some of those as we went forward. But we're also seeing more broadly in across the globe, really, how marketing is becoming much more personal and accessible. But really the key part here when we think about insights is that shoppers, consumers are becoming an important part of the whole development process themselves. Increasingly, we're seeing folks like Jumbo in the Netherlands, Aldi in the UK, Weiss in the US, Lidl in the UK, have all started to put together and leverage what these shoppers have to say about their products, and so it becomes a really good way to get these things together. Tesco has done the same thing, Carrefour, Asda, and so what we've seen that comes as a result of this is really incorporating and collaborating with the shopper, if you will, the consumer, in terms of almost a form of co-creation. But there's also a second benefit to a lot of this, the way it's occurring now in terms of tapping into these insights around consumers, is that by using social media, it changes everything. It allows them also to be advocates, if you will, recommenders, if you will, friends, likers of the product, and so therefore help us reach some new consumers. So what we're seeing is that increasingly the sort of line between what I'll call research and development and almost marketing are starting to sort of be mashed up together, if you will. You think about some of these aspects, like how increasingly retailers are trying to find these insights and how they're turning to shoppers. Another example of this is again is Asda's Chosen by You, and so not only does this help again drive their insight capability, so all the different products that they've sort of put together, but they actually have done a really good job of bringing to the shopper inside the store how this works. And so I think it's the use of this backstory. It's talking to shoppers in a manner that's consistent with the natural language they're using that's really starting to play a role. So this collaboration with shoppers really seems to be paying off. Similarly, we see that Carrefour has done in France has done a really large consumer panel, and again they've done lots of things. There's about 15,000 households inside here, and probably over the last few years they've probably looked at as many as 5,000 different products they've been able to go through, and importantly they've also gotten a number of recommendations out of this. And then one of the last ones I want to talk about is Migros out of Switzerland, and again they've done their Migapedia, which is kind of an interesting website. It allows shoppers to sort of voice their opinions, and actually these have actually become pretty popular in terms of some of the YouTube videos that come out of them. So I think analogous to the haul videos you see here sometimes in the States, where shoppers will come and talk about a review of a recent shopping trip they've had to some retailer. So I think this is really helping because it starts to get the evaluation portion of this, which we like. It's a really good way to feedback in real time, but it also allows us to sort of have some influence on our shoppers as well. The second area I want to talk about for a few minutes is about innovation, and again, we know that innovation is a real heavy watchword here. I think one of the challenges again around innovation is how do I tap into skills? How do I get best of breed in different parts of the soap? If I'm trying to get to people who are flavor experts, or if I'm trying to get to people who are experts in packaging or whatever, we think that this is an area where the heavy emphasis on innovation is really an intensification of what's been historically and perennial an ongoing challenge. But I think it's become even more intense now, and the reason is that used to be that every 2 to 3 years you could probably go for a refresh on your packaging or products or whatever, and we're seeing that almost the pace of this seems to be that for successful portfolios, they almost have to come up with 2 or 3 pieces of news every couple of months. So it's not as if they change everything all the time, but there certainly has to be this notion that innovation is there. Also, the most important thing about innovation, and I think this is why there's such a big focus on it, is it entices shoppers to do something different, to buy, to try, to move, to change the way they do things. And I think this is a way out of the economic tug-of-war we have around things like price. And so if we can start to add some value to these kinds of things from the shopper's point of view, I think there's a really big chance that we can be more successful and can get a little bit more out of the strict price approach to private label. Also, we see that there's a key part of differentiation here that needs to occur versus the competition. So you think about it in one sense, by providing this exclusive experience, by providing these one-of-a-kind products, what it starts to do is it starts to play a huge role in terms of creating the brand, in terms of setting the perception that the brand is truly a shopper advocate. They get me, they understand me, if you will. So we think that this is an important way for the retailers to sort of take a step ahead and help people find ways to make their lives a little bit better. So lots of things that are important here inside of innovation. One other thing I wanted to mention about innovation is that if you think about innovation that is really out there, that's really exclusive, that's really unique, it also starts to change the way in which you have to think about these products financially, because now the challenge is a little bit more than the audience is the people who come down the aisle in my store. So we're trying to see how all these things work together, and I think we'll see that innovation is not unusual in that sense. It also starts to mash up with things like how we go to market and how we sort of understand the shoppers as well. So a couple of trends that are shaping private label we've seen out there. I mean, the whole thing is going to be about basically redefining value, re-engineering value. We've seen things about creating personality out there that are big, pushing the boundaries around a core brand and expanding them, or even extending a brand's frontiers, keeping premium, if you will, or premium special. So those are a couple of things that are really shaping a lot of the trends we've started to see there. And again, what's important about this is, you think about innovations, we're going to talk about how important it is to collaborate both internally and externally here to get these things right. And so, yes, there is a sort of a focus on private label ranges that that continue to sort of evolve the core ones. So they're trying, but we're seeing some new things that are starting to merge as well. So we're seeing the growth of independent tiering. Okay, so we used to always think about good, better, best in terms of our price tiers, but now we're starting to see that a number of retailers have started to see where there are just sort of almost like one-off or independent tiers that can exist by themselves. They're seeing ranges that are developed around specific either retail formats or missions, shopping missions, specific kinds of things. Or we're starting to see umbrella brands that are targeting shopper missions. We're starting to see new sub-ranges that really mirror shopper sentiments and trends. So lots of things that are starting to change in terms of how people are looking at this. So you can start to how shoppers are starting to look at this and how retailers are starting to react to it. And so this really requires a lot of collaboration, if you will, to make sure that these parts get in the right place. Okay, so let's use a couple of things that we said here. One of the things we've seen is that it's important for new product development to really step up and step up the pace, if you will. So as we said before, shoppers are increasingly playing a role inside here. We've seen stuff, we'll come back to this, where if you look at Drugmark in Germany, you can actually go in and create your own unique packaging. Okay, we talked about the flavor creator from Weiss a little bit earlier, but also we're starting to see some collaboration between retailers and national brands just implement new product development and innovation. So if you think about this, it's probably about co-opetition, right? It's about working with your partners right inside the category to make sure they can sort of learn some things from that, and also try to understand how these things can fit better inside the portfolio as a whole. So we're seeing that there's a lot to be learned in many ways from working closely with some of the national brands as we go through here. So it always shouldn't be viewed as competitors, if you will. One of the other key trends we're starting to see here is that the move towards super value, and again, it's probably different than the black and white generic that we may have remembered from the late 70s, early 80s. We've seen brands like Price First that's coming from Walmart. Okay, one of the things that's different about some of these is they don't always have the retailer's brand name attached to them. So Price First is one of those. I think it's in 6 or 7 markets right now, and I believe it'll probably be rolled out from Walmart. Carrefour has done the same thing with their extreme value Petit Prix, and we've seen Real's done some of the same deep discounting in terms of what they've started to deliver. So the point about all these is that there still is this need for extreme value, if you will, in terms of price, and we're seeing a lot of it, and people are continuing to sort of view it as important because shoppers are still being stretched and challenged by the economy. We're also seeing, though, new ways to sort of extend the frontier of brands, right? So what we've seen here is that when we extend these brands, examples would be if you look at what Waitrose has done, they've started to think about a new kitchen range inside there, which starts to allow them to go in some things around, it could be around portion control and healthy eating, but it also allows you to sort of jump into things like general merchandise from food, if you will, or a holistic approach by ICA out of Sweden, which is about, basically, here's a way to do something with your barbecue. So in a sense, these are tying into lifestyles, if you will, and they're allowing retailers to sort of extend across multiple categories. So there's an interesting collaboration there. You think about how, we often we do these kinds of programs, we're siloed by our category, if you will, our portion of the store. I think this is one that starts to foster a more holistic approach. It starts to foster more internal collaboration within the retailer. We've also seen lots of private label brand launches that are trying to add value through better for you foods, if you will. So Tesco's Everyday Value, really, one of the things they started to do, and this is is an economy brand. One of their core ranges contains no MSG, no hydrogenated fats, no artificial flavors or colors, and no GMOs. So you can start to see how these are building on this, and we've seen other versions of the same thing where the Coles out of Australia is sort of their Simply Less brand, and here in the States we've seen Kroger's Simple Truth and Simple Truth Organic as a way to sort of fewer additives, more organic ingredients, and of course My Essentials by Del Hayes here in the States also has sort of taken an angle on better for you food. So we're seeing that playing a very large role in a lot of these. Also, we're seeing lots of retailers are paying attention to what shopper trends or sentiments are that are going around out there. So lots of examples of things that are going out there, specific trends that are kind of current right now. So you think about diet and weight loss, probably always a perennial important trend. Sports and wellness, fresh. We can see things like fair trade, where we started to see some of these like Plus is playing a large role with this in the Netherlands. Free From, so you have Hasno or Free From Tesco. There's a number of these kinds of brands that have sort of been there for everything from gluten or to dairy, which allows people to really solve a problem, if you will. Organic or bio is really important. Ecological things that are a little bit better for the environment, and then finally convenience. So all these are key roles that are hot right now, and we're seeing lots of things being built around there. So again, you can think about this as, being built around, in some ways, innovation being built around consumers. There's sort of almost being a kind of collaboration going on there. We've also started to see a lot more in the way of trying to develop personality among brands, right? So we talked about snack artists earlier, but Woolworths has done the same thing in Australia, ICA in Sweden, and there are a number of these as we've seen the emergence of these more independent tiers that are coming up with more sophisticated personalities, if you will. So it's starting to change a little bit in terms of the landscape. One of the other things that's really key here that we've seen is that the way we go about targeting segments has become pretty sophisticated. So there are a lot of micro segments out there now, and I think it's important for a retailer to have a pretty sophisticated, a pretty accurate, a pretty empathic view of their shoppers. And I think that means that we need to get well beyond the demographic spend model we talked about before, so we can start to tap into some of these different things. You can see, like, here are different, on the left are some different ethnic food groups, if you will. So you can think about how Carrefour has done some of this, Loblaw has done some of this, and TT out of Canada, right, which is their Asian version of if you will, of their banner, if you will, or format. So they've started to target very specific groups inside there. Also, we started to see, again, we talked about the snack artists, but even within there, there's a thing called the women's blend, right? So kind of an interesting, way to target some of this. Where we've seen some of the creepy aliens food stuff, which come out of New Zealand, and we've seen Office Depot has done this thing with One Direction, right, where it was about living nice and so tied to products and all that kind of stuff. So what we've seen is that they're really starting to target genders and age groups more specifically, different kinds of desires and needs among people. So the segments are really starting to play a huge role here, and I think that's one of the reasons why I just want to underscore that we must continue to sort of have that collaboration as we go through with lots of partners. The last area I want to talk about is in terms of marketing, which has started to change, is historically private label has been often the poor stepsister when it comes to go to market. And I think we've all sort of recognized some of this. They're not going to have a lot of money for advertising. Generally, the retailer's not going to give up valuable end cap space just for private label when they could have paying brands do it. So there are lots of reasons why it doesn't pay out, and also really a key part of private label or private brand in and of itself was the fact that we'd go in, and because we didn't have as many marketing costs, we could have better margins and lower price. So I think that's sort of been inherently inside there, but I think what we're seeing now is that, again, if I have a really exclusive product, I may have to amortize this further than just the aisles of my store. So it may mean that I have to reach out into more of my shopper base. It may mean that I have to try and get some new users inside here. And so what we're saying is that social, digital really has changed everything inside here and really has allowed retailers to achieve much, much more. So, those are some of the things we want to take a look at. Okay, if you look at historically, private label has consistently received much less merchandising support than national brands, right? So what we're saying is that that's perhaps not surprising, and I guess part of what goes on, but it's also true that we know that the private label brands have been quite responsive when we've done some of those some of those activities. So it becomes important to take a look at how we can start to bring some of these things to the forefront, how we can do a better job of reaching out and fitting into the shopper's life. And so, one of the things we've seen a lot out there is retailers are starting to use technology as a way to reach their shoppers. And so that can be everything from a virtual fitting room at Kohl's to Pondasuka's ability to track QR codes on produce so you can see where it's at and trace the sort of origins of it. And again, as we said, DM in Germany, the drugstore chain, has an app that enables shoppers to design their own packaging. Again, so you can see how all these things are reaching beyond. They're also engaging shoppers in a reasonable way. So, all providing good things, if you will, in terms of the engagement. We're also starting to see inside here, as we mentioned earlier, just as we used research as a way, we saw that there was a sort of second benefit of incorporating shoppers as my co-creators into this that would allow me to turn bloggers into advocates, right? So the real key point here is that if you go through and do the math on this stuff, you'll see we've always done lifetime value on our loyalist members, if you will, our shoppers. But what we started to see is that actually people who are advocates actually are worth almost more because they can reach more people. So I not only get sort of their lifetime value, but the lifetime value of all those other people they start to reach. So one of the things that we've seen that's been really interesting is you look at the, this Food Lion cook-off that was taking place in last year, right? What started to happen here at the cook-off event is that, a featured meals that were using all the Food Lion private label products. And so not only did you sort of start to see it, but you saw lots of solutions that were starting to be provided by the consumers. And also this was a great way to get some, not only bloggers providing information, but advocates that came out of this. So, it's a very nice way to sort of build up the brands. We're also seeing that increasingly people like, this is from the Kroger website where they talk about provenance and quality, right? So here, this is really becoming more and more important. So, if we look at, the way that people view the world in terms of sustainability, one of the top things is the things I put inside my body and the things I put on my body, right, are two really key things, and they want to know about the safety of those and the quality of those ingredients. And so, Kroger created, this dedicated web page for their private selection. It really does a good job of sort of showing you where these things come from. So I think it's really helpful. It's starting to become important. It becomes a way for shoppers to make comparisons about things in a way that they might not have been able to do it in even a few years ago. And again, we've seen a similar kind of traceability thing that's come from Aldi. It was probably one of the first folks in Germany to do this, where you can see the traceability of different meats, if you will. So, again, we're probably playing a large role here in terms of go-to-market is really starting to take advantage of social and digital media as a way to amplify what they're doing, and it's coming to work really well because it's it's very trusted as a medium. It's also driven by the shoppers. So just a couple of things I wanted to ask or mention in closing. The other thing is that this, if you start to partner, it's a necessary thing almost nowadays in terms of collaboration to sort of achieve almost all these things. And what we're saying is that if I look at this in the way that retailers had in the past, and this is what we've heard directly from retailers, is that there was often this disconnect between retailers and suppliers in terms of what the retailers would say they want and what they actually ended up doing. And so much in the past has been driven by what's our cost per unit, how can we really minimize that. I think what we're starting to see now is how can we get to the best solutions and who are the best partners to help us get there. So the notion of how people start to think about partners inside here is starting to change, and I think that's one of the first and foremost things to take a look at. We also see that, again, we said because this is such a dynamic market, it's gone into significant change, and it really requires new capabilities to deliver innovative products and lines that are relevant and valuable to shoppers. And again, everything from either how do we understand the insights, how do we sort of keep on top of what shoppers are looking at, how do we keep on top of what the competition is doing, how do we make sure that our innovation process moves forward. All those really require new kinds of collaborative relationships, both internally. So think about trying to have the folks who are actually developing the product itself, the manufacturing folks, the marketing folks, right, and the shopper are sort of all in the room at the same time when we're trying to develop products, and we're trying to sort of see how we can get them to the point where they're finally ready for the marketplace, if you will. And again, what we're seeing is that these one of the key things we need about insights, which are really go hand in glove with both the innovation and go-to-market, is that we need to have these. It's more important than ever to have them. We need to have them at a category level, right? So if I think about doing a brand or a price brand tiering, right? What I'm going to need to do in each category is slightly different. And so the way that somebody's going to look at food storage is going to be very different than the way they look at household cleaners is going to be very different than the way they look at pasta or pasta sauce. So we need to understand what the insight is and what are the key things that are sort of triggering those with people. And I think we also have to learn how to do those more quickly. And I think what we've seen is that if we partner with our shoppers directly as part of this innovation process, we can really start to uncover these insights and opportunities in a very fast manner. And then I think finally the last part is that, is we look at how retailers are trying to build omnichannel expertise, right? So shoppers have already said we do this, and you need to look no further than last holiday season where we saw perfect examples of how shoppers are leveraging leveraging omnichannel in a big way, and retailers are starting to play more and more with this, and I think it works really well. Couple examples of that, and start to see how these can start to tie in. So one is we looked at a recent article that was done, a set of interviews done in the Atlantic Monthly with one of the head of Walmart Labs, and they talked about their in-store app. And really one of the things they found about their in-store app that was really good, we could do the scan and go, was not the convenience of it so much, but they saw that a lot of their price shoppers were really using this as a way to manage their budget, so they could scan as they went along and really manage their budget, as opposed to have to go up to the checkout to do some of that stuff and then have to scan and take some of the stuff out. So it allowed you to do it with a better sense of privacy, if you will. So you can see that in general we're seeing that the retailers are trying to create this notion of being, shopper advocate, if you will, and they can do a much better job than most brands because they're going to visit the store more often than any single brand, so to speak. But I think also what it starts to do is you can see how private labels and private brand can play a really key role in this, in trying to say, yes, we're a really good shopper advocate. We understand the shopper. We know what you're about. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for their time and attention, and see if there are any question that are out there. So one of the questions that I just saw a zap across the chat text here is, hasn't innovation always been a key issue for private label development? I think the answer is that yes, of course, it's always been, and it's probably been a big one for just about everybody. I think when we say it's important for private label development now more than ever, is again, given we've seen those 9,000 products being launched a year, right? It's important now to do that, and again, we've seen that it's even more important because we're fighting for that shrinking number of grocery trips, if you will, that we identified with the Nielsen folks going through there. So it's more urgency around this than ever. So another question came in is, why is independent tiering has become so popular among retailers? One of the reasons why independent tiering has become popular is that it's allowed the retailer to deliver value, and it's not necessarily going to be good, better, best in all cases. So if you think about it, I say, I can really do a good job of delivering a whole line of Greek-style yogurts. Okay, so I'm not necessarily going to want to go after every single price point inside there, but rather what this allows me to do is it allows me to go after a segment there, a very specific need of a segment, and allows me to be very strong at doing that without having to worry about, and the independent tiering also has the advantage of being very closely aligned to a particular category. So there are a couple advantages to it, but the two most important ones are that they allow me to really start to zero in on a segment, and it also allows me to really zero in on a category. So it allows me to be very much more specialized. So I think that's why it's becoming much more popular. Another question came up: should retailers actively look to collaborate with partners? How should they do that? Well, there's probably a couple ways to sort of look at collaborating with partners. And again, I think you can look at, you could start with internal partners, right? So you probably want to make sure that you're aligned very well with the folks who are doing analytics inside your company. That's a great place to go. But it could also be that you think about, for insights, working with category captains in each case and start to leverage their thoughts. There'll be a lot of good thoughts about that. And because we need those insights at that category level, that would be a really useful way to employ those folks. I also think that you could start to think about whether you have design agencies that you work with or marketing agency you work with. Those can all be really helpful in terms of trying to help to deliver on insights. A second place where you probably should think about is in terms of the product development itself. What we're seeing is that the interesting part about this is really engaging the shopper and collaborating with the shopper, if you will. And that's becoming probably the biggest thing inside here. So internal collaboration is important. Some external collaboration is important with other agencies and other firms, but especially with the shoppers are really key things. So another question that came up is that, do we think that social and digital examples referred to as fads or trends? Great question. I think one of the challenges we see is that this will probably become more sophisticated. So if we were to chat about this 6 months, 12 months from now, I'm sure we'd see some more sophisticated things that are going on. We've seen stuff in Europe where there have been a couple of these where they've literally introduced a restaurant or a virtual restaurant as a way to sort of, highlight a lot of the edibles and, do some of these things. And they've been quite successful in terms of sort of highlighting the benefits of private brands and how they can really, do a really good job of delivering on those things. We're starting to see more and more of these kinds of things come up, and you're seeing stuff like, it's weird, like rave parties that have been done with some of the energy drinks that have been in Europe that have been, private branded. So lots of angles on which this is going. I think it'll be interesting to see how it continues to evolve. I think it will continue to evolve, and I think, you need to look no further than folks like eMart in Korea, which they've done a lot of really, interesting digital fads. A lot of different digital approaches to things that are really starting to, help them in terms of building both their brands and their shoppers, if you will. So I think we can still look for that to evolve, but I think that, social and digital has really changed everything because, again, it allows this sort of democratization of collaboration, and it allows us to get content, if you will, in natural language and to reach some other shoppers. So I think that will continue to be a big part of this. Any other questions I can ask or answer for anyone? Okay, well, I'd like to thank everybody for their attention and their time. Appreciate it. Okay, yeah, so, and if you have any questions, please, you can sort of email. My email is up there, or if you'd like a copy of the presentation, we can also make sure that you get a PDF of that at some point. Thank you very much.